Hello everyone and welcome back to AustinPlus commentary, where today we are answering questions very similar to the Batman and Spider-Man one, but I thought I would mainly cover it because, let's face it, they're a lot bigger. The James Bond movies are good, don't get me wrong, but there have been over 25 over the last 60 years, each with different characters and different actors. James Bond is far more popular than Spider-Man and Batman, combined since 1962. So, are the James Bonds nowadays pretty much the same? We'll delve into a bit of it, also with the likes of a new James Bond, but let's talk about it. Obviously, we cannot really go into this without obviously discussing the man who started it all and by far the best James Bond that there is, Sean Connery. The most iconic of the Bond actors, but he really set the tone for the James Bond movies with the likes of spy gadgets and cars. This appealed to an audience as it was something that we had actually never seen before, and also films were still trying to get out there a bit in 1962. The first James Bond movie was Dr. No in 1962, starring Sean Connery, and it took the world by storm. It's still one of the most popular James Bond movies to date. Still to this day, these movies are the ones that people tend to watch more than any other actor combined, because these are very different, but these are also original. These are very old, but they hold so much glory. It's the same with any old movie that's still carrying on today. But also, when you've done that many movies, such as 25, it does beg the question if some of them are the same. But I think Sean Connery, even in all of them, he was different in every single one, and from beginning to end, he was James Bond. You knew he was James Bond, but he didn't have to say it, and he just took the world by storm. He lasted for 9 years until 1973. He was replaced by Roger Moore. Sean Connery really set a tone for the film industry, and obviously films were still very new at that time, but Roger Moore was carrying on that legacy through these new James Bond movies. With the likes of Roger Moore, he was tackling some sorts of stories in James Bond franchise that had never been tackled before. But it was always a question that fascinated people, was that if the British did have a secret service at the time. Because that's what the whole James Bond thing is around him. He is a part of the Secret Service, the license to kill. The idea of a what if, I think, has always been intriguing for most viewers. With the likes of the British Secret Service, no one knew what it was, but people would watch these movies to understand if there was, what would happen, and yada yada yada. Also, spy gadgets and everything, that's still appealing 60 years later. That's been appealing since 1962. That's never gotten boring with its Mission Impossible or a Dwayne Johnson spy movie. That will always sell. And Roger Moore, I think, really did set another tone for the James Bond movies. He lasted 12 years, but I think the problem with Roger Moore was that he ended up having to follow Sean Connery. Even to this day, Sean Connery is still the best James Bond. He has had successes, but he is still the best. But Roger Moore, I think, was still so good. But if he came before Sean Connery, I would think Roger Moore would have been better. But it's because Sean Connery came first. He is so much more iconic. And while they carried the same tones, and maybe Roger Moore changed it a little bit to add a bit more differentiation, Sean Connery is just the king. Between 1987 and 1989, Timothy Dalton took on the role of James Bond for 2 films and 2 films only. An actor that really carried on from Roger Moore, I would say this, Timothy Dalton was more of he finished off the Roger Moore story. All of these James Bonds, they are not the same character. Every time there's a new actor, it's because the previous one dies and someone takes on the place. That is the whole idea about James Bond. That took me a few films to realize when I was watching the transitions between 2 different characters and actors. But Timothy Dalton was a bit of a special one because he was finishing off Roger Moore. I don't know why Roger Moore didn't finish it off and do more of and end his story as James Bond, but Timothy Dalton was the one to do so, because that same tone that was from Roger Moore, that was different from Sean Connery, it was basically a spitting image with the likes of Timothy Dalton in these 2 movies. And because Roger Moore's story was not finished, with that movie, and then it was announced that Timothy Dalton was playing the new James Bond. People were still happy that we were getting a new James Bond, something different, but it was finishing off Roger Dalton's story. However, it was at this point that the outlandish idea around spy movies and spy stories were becoming more and more common, and it was becoming more and more true by the day. It would be like, oh, there's so many spies, there are so many people with gadgets, and they would do things for their own secret service, and it was becoming more true. And the whole reason of watching James Bond was because there was outlandish villains, but the villains were also quite realistic, and the James Bond characters were more to do with a what if situation, but this was becoming true more and more and true, which leads me on to Pierce Brosnan between 1995 and 2002. When his movies came around, again, a 7-year gap, that's not actually as long as the others, except for Timothy Dalton, but it was around this time that a more modern James Bond had to come into play, and that they needed to make a change to the James Bond character so that there was still a little bit of mystery left in there. The unbelievable aspect of the character was becoming more and more true, as I said, and more unbelievable. And while Pierce Brosnan didn't last long due to issues with other projects, and I do believe one of them might have been Mamma Mia, he brought something different to the character, and here is where the change and differentiation, I think, was what was going well for this, because they were adjusting to the times. He still kept the glory that had been going on for 40 years at this point, but he was trying to adjust the character and bring something new towards it so it wouldn't die out as quickly as it could have at the time. But in 2006 we had official recasting. Now this is my era. In 2006 we had Daniel Craig portray the latest role of James Bond. For the likes of me, my dad would always put on a James Bond movie, whether it was Dr. No, whether it was literally anyone, where it could have been any actor, and I would have no clue what it meant until I was I was brought to a cinema to watch a James Bond movie, and I watched Spectre, Casino Royale, and all of those ones. All of those are Daniel Craig, so I grew up with him. But once I realised there was multiple, and I was still trying to comprehend why, but then again, why do we have so many Spider-Man? We could be here forever. But I watched these movies willingly as well, as I was growing up, and when I finally got old enough to understand the whole idea around James Bond, that's when I went to go and watch all the other ones. Now, I have watched most of them. I think there's three I haven't watched, and I would just put them on in the background, and that's why I also bring this up, because I've watched these very, very recently. I will say Daniel Craig introduced a way darker role for James Bond, like the jeopardy and the like the darkness of it all. See, in the other ones you had like this music of like dun 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 or something like that, but in these movies, because it was more modern, you could personify that darkness and intrigue so much better, and it would leave you on the edge of your seat, almost like a psychological thriller of what they're going to do. Now, the first ever, and I think this is the only one I've ever seen in cinema, is No Time to Die. I stand by this statement. The best ending to a James Bond character was No Time to Die, and it was Daniel Craig's. And I don't even think Sean Connery could have done it the way Daniel Craig did. I will take that statement to my grave. If someone else disagrees, fine. That is what I think. Now, with the likes of a new James Bond, people are wondering who should be the next James Bond. Honestly, I have no damn clue. There are so many good people out there, but obviously they're trying to choose people that are going to be just as good as Sean Connery. I think people need to come to grips with that just ain't gonna happen. But that's just me. But if you have an idea for a James Bond actor, leave a comment down below. So, do I think James Bond movies are repetitive, or some of them the same thing? The unfortunate answer is yes. I think the beginnings of new James Bonds are, crucial, and so is the ending. Those, I think, are really set apart because they define the character. However, most of the in-between projects, like, say, the first two films and to the last film, so all of those films in between that, I think are very much the same, because you are following the same structure, the same song sheet, and that's why I struggle to watch most of the James Bond movies. It almost became predictable and typical for a James Bond movie, and I think that statement is really sad to say, especially in 2025 when we've got a new James Bond on the way. But without further ado, everyone, that is the end of today's video. I do hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe and comment what else you would like to see on this channel. But without further ado, hope you have an amazing day as always, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!
Yeah.